So our tale today is about a massive flank attack. Yes, we've pressed into action in Suzuki's mighty Hayabusa, a motorcycle that's revered and respected around the world for just what it's managed to do. But considering the competition on hand, I guess it's a little understandable if it feels a bit on the back foot.
It should, because ever since the ZX14R was launched, it has beaten the Busa in the speed game, and now the bike is in its second generation. Already seen an update for this year as well. It's got the better motor, it's got better electronics. It is definitely the faster bike. It is the king of speed.
Agreed, but we have the second generation Busa here, and Suzuki has pulled out the stops by assembling it here in India, which has given it a really killer price tag. It's what?
4 lakh rupees cheaper.
So the question that needs to be answered is whether you should just save some cash, buy the Busa, fantastic deal, game over, or spend a bit more, and whether the ZX14R deserves that extra cash or not.
If you are the kinds who judges a book by its cover, then this is going to be a tough call. The Busa's wind tunnel shaped design isn't pretty, but it is immediately recognizable and is widely admired and respected, which is why even the second generation motorcycle launched in 2008 looks so much like the first generation Hayabusa. While the design was sharpened, some details like the stalks for the mirror and the instrument cluster make the Busa feel a bit dated now. Meanwhile, Kawasaki's ZX14R is much more recent. This generation came around in 2012. Its design is modern in a crazy way. You can see the craggy headlight cutouts, the massive streaks down the side, and the sparkling green color contrasts in an almost sinister manner against the black. Yes, it looks threatening. The cockpit has a simple but smart instrument console, which is easy to read, and the LCD screen packs in a lot of information. Clearly, the thread that ties these two motorcycles together isn't their design.
Now both these bikes are built for speed, and speed comes from a good motor. And both these bikes have wonderful motors. But which one is more special?
Both motorcycles have 4-cylinder liquid-cooled engines. At 1441cc, the Kawasaki's is bigger. It has 220 horsepower and it has 158.2 Newton meters of torque. Even in this company, the Busa's 1340cc motor can't be considered weak. After all, it has 194 horsepower and 155 Newton meters of torque. Sure, the ZX14R is a bit heavier, but as can be seen in the acceleration run, it is faster by 0.2 of a second to 100 kilometers an hour. Bottom line, it's faster, full stop. However, the ZX14R can be a bit of a tough cookie to get the power down, as it gets more vicious as the revs build. The advantage of the Hayabusa's motor is that it feels very friendly, as power is delivered in a very linear manner, and yes, it is still plenty quick. The 6-speed gearboxes on both the bikes are precise, but while the Suzuki feels positive in a solid way, the ZX14R has a light but precise feel, and this engine feels super smooth.
Now when you ride these two motorcycles back to back, considering the level of performance on offer and their end objective, it's really insane as to how different they feel. I mean, the Busa?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the motor's quite old, but even today it feels so good. It's so eager and rearing to go. It is a little gruffer compared to the 14R, yes. There are some vibes at certain RPMs. But still, even today, it feels fantastic.
But I'll define that as mechanical feel of the motor, because along with that you have this beautiful intake sound which I just love. But I get it, you know, when you step off the Busa and onto the 14R, it's crazy. I mean, that bike is just vibe free. It's so refined.
Absolutely refined, and there is just so much grunt at any RPM, any gear. Just open the throttle and it just goes.
I think that's what the thing is. It shocks you because it's so refined, and then you open the gas and in the mid-range it just goes pop, ballistic.
Completely mental.
I think that's a good thing that you have so much electronics on it as well.
Absolutely, the traction control I think is a good boon to have on a bike like this. Plus it also has riding modes which really help as well.
That's where the Busa does one better because it has 3 riding modes as opposed to 2 on the ZX14R, but I have to admit there's no traction control on the Busa, and we did get a bit of rain today, so I was a bit worried when that happened, but because of the linearity of the power delivery from the engine, it was just very predictable and easy to get used to those conditions. Yes, you don't have that wider safety net that the ZX14R has to offer, but nonetheless, I think that engine and how it drives is just fantastic.
And of course, we've spoken about performance, but these motors have also been designed for highway touring, for really long distance mile munching. So let's find out which one is better in that regard.
First, the basics. Both motorcycles use the same tire sizes and share the same wheelbase. And unsurprisingly, they are utterly planted and confident while cruising at higher speeds on the highway. The wind protection was ample for touring. Equally impressive on both the bikes were the seats. Even after many hours, they remain completely comfortable. The Kawasaki suspension setup is on the softer side, and at the rear, it packs a Öhlins monoshock with a remote preload adjuster, which is really handy for when you're traveling with a pillion or luggage. The Suzuki also has a fully adjustable monoshock at the rear, but you will need some tools to make changes to it. But it was the Suzuki suspension setup that felt better overall. It was pliant, and over the rougher stuff, it felt very well damped as well. And while munching miles, both these engines were completely unstressed.
Okay, if you are into clocking lots of kilometers really fast, there's no doubt about it, the ZX14R is the better motorcycle.
Absolutely, what works for it is the fantastic motor refinement and the ergonomics. I just love them. They're not really extreme, you're fairly upright.
Yeah.
For me, the Busa feels a little bit extreme, a little bit super sporty in that nature, where they leaned over quite a lot and it can wear on your wrists and your back over a long highway ride.
PD, I think you forgot to tell everybody that the Busa also manages to deliver the better ride quality even over bumpy roads.
Yeah, absolutely. Have to give that
Surprise,
one.
surprise, but it does. But that's not the only surprise that the Busa has, because when you hit a twisty section, wait and see.
For the record, the Kawasaki has a higher geek quotient because of its monocoque chassis. The Busa uses a regular twin beam frame. But when you hit the twisties, it's the Busa that comes to life. When you tuck into a corner, you wonder, where has the weight gone? The Busa darts in and whips through. Sure, it is a bit of a handful when you hustle it through switchbacks, but even then, it's way crisper than you could have imagined. The only irritant through the corners is that as you roll on and off the gas, the throttle feels jerky. Also, the throttle is actually a bit heavy and can get tiring. Both motorcycles use 310mm dual discs at the front. The amount of the bite from the Busa's brakes though feel just about adequate. With more recent updates, the Kawasaki now uses Brembo's M50 monoblocks, and those are plain fantastic. They give it plenty of stopping power and feel, which is exactly what this green spaceship needs. In the corners though, the ZX14R is a bit wafty. Steering the Kawasaki through corners needs a bit of a heavy hand. And even then, it just doesn't feel as neat or as precise as the Busa. It feels more at home on the long sweepers.
It's just crazy how this motorcycle, the chassis is essentially the same from the first generation Busa, and it just pulls you into the experience of riding the motorcycle. It is definitely the highlight of this bike, the way it handles. I mean, look at the small signs on the bike in terms of the way the handlebars are set up. You know, they are narrower, they are tapering downwards, the seating position, the foot pegs, they're just like tighter, so there's that clear, sportier focus on the Busa.
Yeah, and the 14R on the other hand well, it works very well on the highway, but show it some corners and not so much. It does show its weight. It's a pretty bulky bike. It's not like it's a bad handler, but you have to sort
Far
of
from
plan
it.
your
I-
you have to plan your lines a little bit in advance. You have to plan your entry and your exit a little bit in advance.
I think neither of these two bikes are really going to compete with like your out and out super sports. Both of them require a little bit more thought and effort, but at the end of the day, the motorcycle that just puts a smile on your face when you get to that set of corners.
the Busa.
While it really isn't a big deal on a big bike, we like to pinch a few pennies when possible, and the Busa manages to deliver better fuel efficiency. And when it comes to the price, the ZX14R costs nearly 18 lakh rupees, while the Made in India Busa costs under 14 lakh rupees. So the question is, just what kind of hyperspeed bike is right for you?
Now both these motorcycles have come from a very similar philosophy, but they have ended up becoming two very different bikes.
Absolutely. I think for somebody who really wants something to really clock kilometers on, no doubt about it, the ZX14R is the motorcycle. It offers you a little bit more in terms of safety with the traction control, but for all of that, you're going to be paying a lot.
Quite a
more.
lot extra.
Yeah, and the Busa, I mean, on those fronts, yes, it's not as comfortable. Yes, the engine isn't as smooth. Yes, it doesn't have traction control, but it is still a fairly usable motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean, on a day like today when you're riding out in the twisties on those winding roads, that Busa just puts such a big smile on my face, and it totally won my heart.
I think that's really it. The way it pulls you into the experience of the ride, and that's what I think most motorcyclists in India are looking for. The Busa just shines. And when you club in the fact that it's so much cheaper than the ZX14R, it just seals the deal.